Today, we're diving into one of the most intense and detailed warnings in all of ancient scripture. Seriously, it's a fascinating mix of military strategy, prophetic irony, and a city right on the edge of total collapse. Let's get straight into it. So, picture this. It's 609 BC. The old superpower, Assyria, has just crumbled. A new, hungry empire, Babylon, is on the rise. And caught right in the middle is the small kingdom of Judah. It's a total pressure cooker, politically unstable, militarily exposed. And right into this chaos walks the prophet Jeremiah with one last desperate alarm.
Now, this wasn't just some vague, gloomy prediction. No way. As we're about to see, this was basically an intelligence briefing from another realm. Jeremiah lays out exactly who is coming, how they're going to attack, and most importantly, why. Understanding the specifics here is absolutely key.
Okay, so the warning kicks off with some really immediate physical instructions. Jeremiah isn't talking in metaphors here, he's practically shouting a military evacuation order. And you have to understand the timeline to feel the urgency. Jeremiah is speaking right in that chaotic gap after the good king Josiah dies, and just before Babylon really cements its power. The disaster he's warning about isn't some far-off event, it's imminent. That clock is ticking down fast to 586 BC. Now, this is what's so cool. The geographic precision here is just incredible. The prophet calls for trumpets in a town called Tekoa and fire signals from Beth Hakram. These aren't just random places he pulled out of a hat. They were strategic high points in an actual, ancient early warning system. He's telling them, activate the National Emergency Broadcast System now. So you might be wondering, why from the north? I mean, Babylon was to the east, right? Well, ancient armies didn't just march in a straight line across the brutal Arabian desert. They couldn't. They had to follow the Fertile Crescent, that big arc of rivers and farmable land. So for any army invading from Mesopotamia, they would have to swing around and descend on Judah from the north. This isn't just prophecy, it's just solid military logistics.
But, the invading army is really only half the story. To get why this judgment is coming, we have to look inside the walls of Jerusalem, because according to Jeremiah, that's where the real problem is.
And this slide just lays out the core conflict perfectly. On one hand, Jerusalem is supposed to be this ideal, a comely and delicate woman. Chosen, beautiful, protected. But on the other hand, the reality on the ground? It's a city filled with oppression, a place of violence and exploitation. The city has two faces, and its identity is completely fractured. That phrase, describing Jerusalem as a delicate woman, or daughter of Zion, is what scholars call covenant intimacy language. It's meant to frame the relationship between God and his people like a marriage or a close family bond. And understanding that is so important, because it means the coming judgment isn't some cold, robotic punishment. It's a tragic, painful family breakdown. So how does Jeremiah actually describe these invading Babylonians? Well, he uses one of the most chilling and ironic metaphors you'll ever read. He calls them shepherds. Now think about that. In the ancient world, shepherd was a common term for a king, a protector, someone who guides and cares for his people, his flock. But Jeremiah flips that image completely on its head. Here, the shepherds are the Babylonian commanders, and their flocks, well, they're the invading armies, and they're not here to protect, they're here to devour. It's an absolutely devastating use of irony. And then you get this little detail. They shall feed everyone in his place. It sounds almost peaceful, but it's incredibly sinister. This tells you it's not a quick smash-and-grab raid. It points to a systematic, organized, long-term military occupation. The Babylonians aren't just passing through, they're moving in. And that's exactly how they operated historically. So what would that occupation actually look like on the ground? Jeremiah gives us a terrifying front-row seat to the brutal mechanics of an ancient siege. Get this, the invaders plan to attack day and night. Now, nighttime attacks were super risky and pretty rare in ancient warfare, so this detail signals a fanatical level of commitment. There's going to be no rest, no relief, no ceasefire. And they're ordered to destroy her palaces, a direct strike against the very heart of the city's government and identity.
Jeremiah even describes the technical process of the siege. This wasn't just chaos, it was a well-practiced, three-step military procedure. First, you hew down trees for lumber and to clear the field of battle. Then, you cast a mount. You build these enormous earthen ramps right up to the walls, making them totally useless. This was the Babylonian playbook, and it was terrifyingly effective.
And that final siege, when it finally happened,
lasted for 18 months. Just let that number sink in. 18 months trapped inside the city walls. That meant mass starvation, rampant disease, and a total collapse of society. That number tells a story of almost unimaginable horror.
But after all this grim detail, all this unstoppable destruction, the prophecy makes one last shocking turn. The tone shifts from military strategy to this final, desperate spiritual plea.
Which, of course, brings us to the ultimate question. After laying out this detailed, seemingly unavoidable vision of total ruin, is there any hope left? Is there any kind of escape clause?
And the answer comes in verse 8. Be thou instructed, O Jerusalem. Even now, at the absolute last minute, there's a call to learn, to change, to turn back. It's one last offer of mercy, but it comes with the most terrifying condition you can imagine, lest my soul depart from thee.
And this right here, this is the most critical insight in the entire chapter. The real disaster isn't the Babylonian army showing up at the gates. The real catastrophe, the point of no return, is the departure of God's presence. Once that happens, the city is already lost. The military destruction is just the physical evidence of a spiritual reality that has already occurred.
All right, so let's quickly recap what we've seen. We've seen that warnings tend to get more and more severe when people refuse to listen. We've seen how real-world stuff like geography and military tactics can perfectly line up with prophecy. We've learned that once judgment finally begins, it moves with this relentless momentum. But maybe most importantly, we see that God pleads for change right up until the very end.
When you boil it all down, Jeremiah 6 gives us this picture of a city where the trumpets are blaring, where mercy is being offered right at the edge of the cliff, and yet it still rushes headlong into ruin. It's a timeless, powerful lesson. Ignoring the alarm bells doesn't stop the fire, it just guarantees you'll get burned.